You're listening to Expat Radio. I'm Bill Anderson, and we are coming live from the Costa del Sol. It's a beautiful day in paradise yet again. Temperatures have begun to drop a little bit, which is really very pleasant. And I am delighted to introduce my guest today. I'm going to try and get your name right, Nick, first time. Nicoli Unt. How is that for pronunciation?
Honestly, not great. It's Nicoli. So it's Nicoli, and it's Unt as well.
Unt, okay. Well, I got it all wrong. Is that a Welsh name, is it?
Actually, my mum couldn't spell my name correctly. It was meant to be named after my grandfather from Russia.
Right.
And my mum couldn't spell it when she registered me at birth, so I have this name. And there's only one other person in the world that spells their name the same way I do. And he works for me.
Oh, right. Okay. So you do pronounce it Nikolai.
Yeah.
Although you're affectionately known as Nick, aren't you?
Nick is much easier. Unless you're Spanish though, and they always keep getting called Nick.
Nick. Yeah. Well, I get called Bill. So your sort of ethnic roots, or part of them at least, are in Russia then, Nick?
Well, my grandfather was from Estonia. He was a refugee during World War II.
Right.
And so I have a lot of Estonian and Russian stock somewhere over there, but they were all refugees. They came over to the UK in 1947, I think, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. So you were born in the UK?
Yep, exactly. I was born in Dorset in the UK.
In Dorset.
One of the first in my family to be born outside the Midlands. They were all from the Midlands originally.
Right.
Wolverhampton, Dudley, Stafford, and then they moved down to Dorset, and then I was born.
Right. Well, I kind of thought that the sea had to be there somewhere, Nick, because we're going to be talking about diving, and you have a company down here called, funnily enough, Diving with Nick. And
yes, I do, yep.
There must be some great diving around the Dorset area, is there?
There is some amazing diving around the Dorset area. I come from a diving family. My dad dived, my uncles all dived, my brother dives, I dive, we all dive. And my dad was an instructor in the late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did a lot of diving up in Wolverhampton and tried to open up a dive centre there. And then I think that's one of the reasons why he moved to Dorset, was to actually get a bit closer to the sea. Yeah.
Is there a lot of places to dive in Wolverhampton?
I don't think so. I think it was mostly diving in lakes and quarries, which, not my cup of tea. I prefer the sea.
Right. Okay. So from what you said then, Nick, kind of apart from diving being in your family, it's kind of in your blood. When did you start diving?
Well, I started diving. I suppose I actually started diving in 1989. So I know that's mad. I'm only 36 years old, but when I was 4 years old, my dad made a little set of equipment up with a tiny little tank, picked me up and dropped me in the pool. And I cried my eyes out, got really scared, and never tried it again for another 10 years. But I learned to dive for the first time in 2000.
Right.
So I've been diving now for 21 years.
Right. So is this, would you say, is kind of a passion that you've turned into a job?
You know, it can sound sloppy, but even more than that.
Okay, tell me.
I learned to dive in 2000, and then I did lots and lots of diving for many, many years. And then, your early 20s start off, and you get other priorities in life, shall we say. And I didn't make too many good choices during my 20s, and spent a lot of time being a bit irresponsible. Right. And that's why I moved out to Spain, was to get away from all that and the old Nick. And I rediscovered diving when I came out here and did all my professional level qualifications here, and haven't looked back.
Yeah, so in the UK, the wardens were catching up with you, Nick, and you decided to exit, yeah?
I think as many other people here have done so as well. A new start. I got on a plane, Bill, and with a backpack on my back, and I haven't been back since, really.
So when was that you moved down here, Nick?
2013. November 2013, yeah.
Yeah. And why the Costa del Sol? Why this particular area?
Well, I've been visiting here since I was a little kid. I mean, the first time we came out here as a family, I was 6 months old.
Uh-huh.
And so I've been coming to Calahonda, or to I live in Calahonda.
Right.
And I've been coming here for years and years and years. I've known, when you go to El Zoco or you go somewhere in La Cala and you see the same staff or the staff that now started off as a little KP and now they own a restaurant and
Right.
here and it's a second home.
Right.
Plus, my parents live here as well. So when I wanted to get away and start a new life, they said, "Come out, we'll look after you for a little bit," and they helped me get restarted out here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting place to live, isn't it? Because it is an enormous area. I mean, 150 square kilometers, Mijas, where we live. But it's kind of broken down into sort of little communities all around Mijas, isn't it?
Exactly.
And you do get to know people. You know, you walk down the street and you recognize people and they stop and talk, or you're in a cafe and someone sits down beside you, and it's a very friendly sort of place to live, isn't it?
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. I find it far more friendly than the UK ever was. And I lived in a small town in the UK and I knew everyone. But as you say here, you sat in the pub and then someone just walked past you and, oh, hello, mate, how are you? And all this. And people come round and they recognize you. And especially now, like being a business owner here and more people get to recognize me and see me.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I love it.
So when did you set the business up, Nick? You came here 2013.
And I set it up in 2016, October 2016.
Right.
And I was operating out of my home.
Uh-huh.
I had a little Suzuki Jimny and four sets of equipment and just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I started off advertising and started taking one person out every day. And then I upgraded to two people every day because I could buy a trailer. And
Right.
so I had a trailer on the back of the Jimny, and it's just built up every year since then.
Right. So from 2013 to 2016, really, you were concentrating on getting your pieces of paper and your experience up, yeah?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I did the year of training. I did my dive master and my instructor courses,
Uh-huh.
and then I went traveling and I did a year's traveling around the world,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up living in Cambodia
Wow.
and running a dive center out there.
Uh-huh.
And I came back full of confidence and a completely changed person. And I
Mm-hmm.
came back and said, right then, I can do it here.
Mm-hmm.
So I started up diving with Nick.
Right. So what is I have to ask you this. What is the most exotic place that you've dived in? Would it be Cambodia or somewhere else?
Oh no, I've had the privilege to have dived in some really amazing locations, some really beautiful locations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Similan Islands of Thailand are very nice. Egypt is spectacular.
Right.
But I've 2 years ago I went to Belize with some friends of mine.
Uh-huh.
That was really really nice.
Uh-huh.
Jump in the water. There's a black tip reef shark right in front of you, and just there with your camera. Oh man,
And
absolutely amazing.
is that a good thing, is it?
Oh, definitely, man. I love sharks. I absolutely love sharks, and they are very misunderstood creatures. I wish we had more sharks around here.
Yeah, well, I kind of know a little bit about that because one of my sons actually had planned to study marine biology. So he did a lot of work at one of the sea life centres in Scotland with the marine biologists who worked there, and sharks was his thing, you know. And he certainly was in love. He decided in the end to do something different because he kind of felt that having talked to the marine biologist that there were not that many openings for these kind of jobs, so he decided to go down a different route. But that was certainly his passion. Yeah.
Well, that's the problem with jobs, isn't it? If you find a job you love, then it's probably guaranteed that a lot of other people love it as well, and so the demand goes up, and there's only a limited amount of spaces.
Yeah. So I mean, I asked you the question, what's the most spectacular place you've dived in? I'm going to ask you another question on that line, Nick. As a diver, what makes a place for diving spectacular? What is it about this particular place that as a diver you think, wow?
The answer to that really can be quite complicated because there are many different things that could be considered to be spectacular. I mean, if you go for shipwrecks, for example,
Right.
Then you can go to Portugal, you can go to Gibraltar, and there are some spectacular shipwrecks there.
Ah, right. Okay.
You don't have to go far away for amazing stuff. And you know, for example, you can go to 1.5 hours down the road here to Marina del Este, and that can be spectacular on an amazing day.
Right.
It can also be rubbish, but people turn around to you and say, "Oh, I want to go to Thailand because it's beautiful. You can go diving there." It's like, well, yeah, I've been in Thailand and it's been incredible, and I've been in Thailand and it's been 2 meter viz. It's
Right.
the sea is a very random thing that we can't control,
So,
and so
so
good visibility.
the visibility is one of the things then, Nick, that makes a dive good or bad. Yeah.
I would say so, but there's a saying in diving, Bill. You never have a bad dive if you look at what's there and not what isn't.
Right.
So, for example, when you have a bad visibility day, no matter where you are, you look for different stuff. You're not looking around you; you're looking for the really small stuff, and they can find some incredible creatures called nudibranchs, which are less than a centimeter big, and you just go looking for these amazing things. And there are over 5,000 species of these around the
Right.
world in every single color you can think of. They are beautiful and amazing.
Mm-hmm. You were saying about diving off wrecks off Gibraltar and oh, sorry about that. Off Gibraltar and Portugal. What are we talking about here? I mean, we're talking about World War II. We're talking about sort of shipping accidents. Are we talking about Battle of Trafalgar? What kind of wrecks are we talking about there?
Well, I mean, if I talk about the wrecks around here, I mean, if you go to Gibraltar, you can find anchors from the Romans and the Phoenicians.
Oh, really?
You can find, yeah, you can find amphons, you can find olive oil jars, you can find everything from 2,000 years of shipping history.
Right.
There's a Bombay bomber from World War II that you can go diving on. There are ships from the Victorian ages. It's some incredible stuff.
Right.
There's even, you talk about the Battle of Trafalgar. There's off of San Pedro,
Mm-hmm.
we have a 300-year-old French shipwreck there.
Right.
That's an old wooden warship. I found a 300-year-old coin on it the other day,
Right.
and it's incredible stuff we can find.
And if you find stuff at these wrecks, are you allowed to take them? Do you have, or do you have to hand them in somewhere, or what happens to things that you might find on the seabed?
I think I should be very careful how I answer that question.
No, what I'm,
No,
what I'm going
technically you're not allowed to.
No, okay.
But the thing is, what you do is that I have found a couple of things and I've brought it back, and I've been in contact with the University of Malaga, and we've had a discussion, and they teach you how to preserve these things. So
Right.
it all depends if you find it in a situation where it's going to get lost or if it's part of the environment, and we don't want to destroy the environment at all.
Right, of course. Right. Okay.
Something.
So, you set up your business in 2016. How have things been for you over the last 18 months with all this COVID stuff? Has it ticked over, or has it been a struggle?
You know what? I've actually just been doing my last quarter accounts before I came on here. You know what, Bill? Like it has been for everyone, it's been one of the most awful 18 months ever for businesses.
Right.
It's been an absolute struggle. We came at one point close to going under. I had to actually borrow some money of some friends of mine to try to stay afloat, which they luckily did, and I paid them back a couple of months ago.
Right.
But then the counter to that was when, for example, last year in 2020, we had July and August and we were open. I had my best ever summer.
Ah, right. Okay.
Okay. And then this year, I've had my best ever summer, even more.
Right.
So when we are open, the demand is there. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But it's just being allowed to open and being able to open in a way that is safe.
Yeah,
And,
sure.
yeah, that's the problem we've had. So when we've been locked down, it's been awful, obviously. But when we're open, the people come back. People are desperate now to do something more with their lives, I think. People have been locked up for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people like coming down here with lovely beaches and long beaches. I mean, Mykonos alone has about 14 kilometers of beach. We've got a lot of beaches, but there's maybe only so much time people can spend lying baking in the sun on a beach, isn't there?
I'm blonde, and I can't spend much time on the beach whatsoever.
No.
And yeah, so I would rather put on a suit and go underwater. For me, that's far better.
Right.
But yeah, people want adventure. I mean, I think also people are more concerned now about sitting on the beach all day, baking in the sun. I mean, people don't want to do that anymore. People like adventure and people like activities to do, and especially when we've been sat around on a sofa eating
Sure.
chocolates for the last 18 months, like I have been, and drinking a few beers, shall I say? Um,
Do you still fit into your wetsuit, Nick?
just, just, oh my! At the beginning of the season, it was a little bit of a push. I've lost some weight now due to actually activity, but yeah, it was a bit tight around the shoulders, shall I say?
Who would you say are your typical customers, Nick? Are we talking about tourists? Or are we talking about locals that want to get into diving?
I think it's a really, really healthy and pleasant and surprising mix of all of it.
Right.
I have um I have a healthy number of local people that want to go diving and want to carry on diving, and the tourists. You said we've had a family from Romania come in yesterday. We had a family from Ireland come in the other day. We had a family from the UK in today, and there's a whole family going diving together. And sometimes there's two families together, so you get ma and dad, you get the brothers and sisters and cousins and everyone else, and
Right.
it's an activity they can do all together.
Sure. Sure. And I'm allowed to ask the silly questions that probably people who know about diving already know the answer to. But do people need to have some kind of qualification to go out with you, or do they do something with you to get a qualification? How does all that work, Nick?
Well, I set up the business as a school. We're actually a state registered school,
Ah,
so I
right.
can do all the training for all the levels here,
Uh-huh.
and people can come in one day and they can learn to dive in a day. They don't get a certification, but they do what we call a try dive, discover scuba diving, and they do one dive in the pool and then they go diving in the sea straight away, and
Right.
they get to actually go off and experience and do a day's diving with an instructor in a small group and go off together. So they get to see what it's like in one day rather than committing to spending 4 days doing a course.
Right. Okay. Okay. And what was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, is there a lot of interest? And people who live down here. I mean, I live here because although I'm not a beach person, I do love being near the sea.
Mm.
Is there a do you see a lot of interest from people who live down here in actually getting involved in this kind of activity?
Definitely so, and definitely more so since we moved to our new location last year.
Right.
So we were in Calahonda before, and now we're right on the carretera in front of El Chaparral.
Yeah.
And we have a big sign saying Scuba Diving Center, which I'm sure everyone in Mijas has probably seen by now.
Well,
And
that's
a lot
right.
of
And you're literally about 50 meters from the sea, aren't you?
I can see the sea from where I'm sat right now. I can literally throw a stone and it could be in the sea.
Right.
And um, and a lot of local people have come in since being here and go, I had no idea you could go diving here.
Uh-huh.
And there is some incredible diving here in Mijas.
Right.
I was surprised. I'd never actually dived in Mijas before I even moved here. I was always going a little bit further afield.
Hmm.
And we're lucky enough right here to have a natural reef 200 meters offshore.
Right.
Beautiful, loads of rocks. And there, Bill, I've seen endangered species. I've seen rays. I've seen eels. I've seen octopus. I've seen cuttlefish. I've seen all the species that we have over there in 4 or 5 meters of water, and it's beautiful.
Right. Okay. Um, Something that I know people who come here on holiday notice is that the sea off our coast here, because we're on the south coast of Spain, and I guess we get currents coming from the Atlantic through the Strait of Gibraltar and finding its way back and forward there. The sea can be pretty cold here sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, yes, yes, it can. Yes, 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 it can. I love summer for that reason. It's nice and warm at the moment, but in the wintertime, um, I was shocked. I mean, the honest answer is, Bill, we go from 28 degrees in the summer
Right.
during a couple of weeks in August when the sea gets that warm,
Uh-huh.
and in the wintertime it can go down to 12.
Right. Yeah.
And so you have the biggest range in here. But that change in temperature encourages such a large biodiversity of life. And as
Of
you said, we
course.
have currents coming in permanently from the Atlantic, bringing in all the life from the Atlantic.
Right.
This is why there's so much fishing in this area.
Mhm.
We're in a part of the Mediterranean called the Alboran, and there's so much life here as a result of those currents and those changing temperatures.
Right. Okay. Um, Nick, we're going to take a short commercial break now. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about some of the other work you've been doing in connection with your diving. So over to you, Dave, for a short break.
You're listening to Expat Radio, your worldwide friend.
Welcome back. I'm Bill Anderson. We're coming live from the Costa del Sol. My guest today is Nicoli Unt from Diving with Nick, and we're talking about all things underwater. I have to say, Nick, that I was a huge fan of Jacques Cousteau when I was young. We used to have television programs about him, and I used to love watching what they were doing.
I have all the DVDs from his shows.
Really?
I actually have them playing in the dive center half the day, so I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and you know, I guess in many ways the whole world has opened up since I was young, and watching these kind of programs, taking you to locations that I knew I would never go to or thought I would never go to, and then you know, explaining everything and the kind of adventure of it all is fantastic, isn't it?
Absolutely. It gives me much inspiration as well.
Hmm.
Um, people like Jacques Cousteau and Hans and Lottie Haas,
Hmm.
Lloyd Bridges from Sea Hunter, for example, in the 60s.
Yeah,
I mean, these people were absolute pioneers. I even have pictures of them on the dive center.
right.
We call them the Legends of Scuba. And these programs and these people were just an inspiration to both myself and my dad.
Right.
And we tried to follow in their footsteps. I mean, they made mistakes. They weren't really that much of a conservationist, but you look at Blue Planet and Planet Earth, programs made by David Attenborough,
Mm.
and you look at a program made in the 1950s with him, and he's eating a turtle shell, and to what he's doing now, we learn, and by looking at these programs, we can see how much we have learned and improved, and know more about how we impact the environment and what we do and what is appropriate behavior and not. It's just a learning experience, and we're human beings. We learn.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, it's nice to see this what I would call evolution in the human consciousness, that perhaps wasn't there 50 years ago or 60 years ago, but now we are beginning to, I think, take more notice of the world around us, aren't we?
Well, I think the technology is there that we can now beam definition video from under the water
Hmm.
into people's homes, and we can show people actually what is happening.
Hmm.
We have the ability to collect big data. We at the dive center we collaborate with a few organizations that collect big citizen data. So every time we go underwater, we record the amount of trash or plastic that we find, and then we report that to different international organizations to try to help them
Right.
get a picture of what's happening in the world.
Yeah,
Um,
we're going to talk about that in just a moment, Nick. But I want to ask you something else. Uh, you know, we were kind of amazed when we started getting things like satellite images of where we live. You know, because we're seeing our world from a different perspective. And what I was thinking is that you, as a diver, are also seeing our world from a very different perspective. And
Very much so.
you know, there are things like, you know, people clap their hands as the boats go by, scooping out the jellyfish, and all they see are these ugly blobs being dumped on the beach. But, you know, even things like a jellyfish must look quite magnificent in their own environment.
I have some absolutely incredible photographs of jellyfish in their natural environment. They are really, really beautiful creatures.
Mm.
And, it is, I saw, okay, there are many different species of jellyfish. Most
Sure.
people around here will know what we call the mauve stingers, the purple ones. But I saw pictures of people on the beaches in both Spain and in Gibraltar picking up these big white ones with the black tentacles.
Right.
These are called Rhizostomi luteum. They're an endangered species.
Right.
Okay, they were thought to be extinct until they were rediscovered here.
Ah.
And people are just taking them out because it's an inconvenience. Oh my, we can't go to the beach today. They are just simply being blown about by the wind,
Right.
and I found it really disgusting. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are annoying as you like, we
Sure.
had 3 days where we couldn't go diving because we had a jellyfish storm this summer.
Right.
And the business loses money, your customers are unhappy, but we accept it. We don't start scooping out jellyfish. They're going to go away in a couple of days' time.
Yeah.
We have to accept that. And it was horrible to see, Bill.
Uh-huh.
And you're killing a creature.
Yeah.
When people see this.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not because they're causing a problem to their environment. It's because they're creating an inconvenience for us.
Yeah, exactly. And when you go even one step further, Bill, and you try to understand why are we getting these jellyfish swarms, there's a simple reason why.
Oh,
It's because we have killed all the apex predators that eat them.
right.
So we ask ourselves, what are the creatures that actually eat jellyfish naturally? And they are turtles, and they are sunfish, okay, and they are the big apex creatures that unfortunately we have around here, but we are killed by bycatch or by shipping incidents.
Right.
The amount of sunfish that have been washed up recently on the shores of Gibraltar and in Spain is disgusting, and they are
Right.
being hit by boats because these fish come up to the top and they float at the top, and then they get hit by boats and they're killed. The
Right.
same with the turtles.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the sunfish. What kind of size of fish is it? I mean, is it a large, medium, small fish or?
The sunfish is better known as the mola mola,
Oh,
okay, and they grow up to 2 meters big. They are the largest
wow.
bony fish in the world,
Oh,
okay, and we are privileged to have them in our waters, and they are majestic, amazing creatures, but
right.
they are very susceptible to being hit by boat traffic because what happens is that they go up to the surface to warm up,
Mm-hmm.
and they float on one side. They're a very thin,
Mm.
almost like a saucer, and they go up to the top, and then birds actually come down and eat the bacteria and the barnacles on them, and they
Right.
come up to get cleaned by birds. And while they're floating on there, they get one little fin sticking up, and they look like a shark, and people get scared by it.
Right. And so they are. Would you say they're becoming endangered around here?
They are endangered.
They are
They are
endangered.
they are already endangered. It is an absolute travesty that these creatures are endangered, and yet we have them all over the place here.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
when you're saying they're hit by boats, are we talking about sports boats and speed boats and this kind of thing, rather than shipping boats and things?
All sorts of boats, Bill. It's all sorts of boats because they can't get out of the way, and they don't really notice where they are. They just sit there on the surface, chilling out, relaxing, and the boat will drive into them.
Right.
And we found bodies of mola mola that have had the chunks taken out of them by propellers, and
Right.
big impact marks on them, and it's very, very, very sad.
Yeah. So that's one reason why we've got this explosion of jellyfish, and it has been happening. Well, I don't know. I guess we always had jellyfish, but over the last few years, I've certainly been more conscious that they have been in larger quantities as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what other kind of exciting? You talked about rays. I think I saw a photograph. It was probably on your page of a ray that was taken quite recently.
Yeah, man, the rays. I didn't think we had any rays when I first came to Spain. I really didn't, and I found my first one. And I was so happy. And it turns out we have 6 or 7 different species of ray here,
All right.
including one that is a truly endangered species according to the International Union for Conservation,
Right.
and it is called a raya mosaica, what the Spanish would call a mosaic ray.
Okay.
We call it in English an undulate ray. Amazing, amazing creatures, and I've seen them in 4 meters of water in front of the dive center.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
And
and we also,
we're talking about big fish here, aren't we?
yeah, exactly, a meter wide with a meter and a half long.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's fascinating. I've never been diving. I'm not a huge fan of water, but it's not really a good qualification for saying I don't like water, but I think I'll go diving. But
I tell you what, Bill. I once had a customer say, "I'm scared of water and I'm scared of fish, but I'd like to go diving to get over my fear."
all right, okay.
And you're there going, "Oh, do I really want to do this? What am I putting myself in for?" And it took me 6 days. I did manage to get it qualified to A level,
All right,
but it took me
okay.
6 days. It was a challenge. It was a quiet time, so I decided I can do with the challenge. But she started off not being able to put her face in the water, and she ended up with a scuba diver qualification. So
Right. Okay. Well, there's hope for me yet then, Nick. To go back to what you mentioned there, we first met actually via a live stream, and we were talking about the work that you were doing with another group in terms of, well, they were concentrating partly on beach cleaning, and you were working with them as well for cleaning some of the rubbish that ends up on our seabeds. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
of course, yeah. So um, I helped train two lovely women, a mother and a daughter, called Natasha and Nikki,
Mm,
and I helped complete their diving course, and they were really happy. But they were shocked at the amount of plastic they were seeing in the sea all around the world because they did diving in a few different areas. They went to Egypt, they went to another couple of places, and they came back and they wanted to do something more about it. So they set up Mimawana, which is an environmental foundation, which was focused on doing beach cleans and we're raising awareness for the amount of plastic and rubbish being deposited on our beaches, coastlines, and in the sea.
right.
And they asked us to be a partner with them to help do an underwater cleanup on each of the events. So we've
Hmm.
been doing that with them for the last few years.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're saying plastics. What kind of stuff are you finding, and in what kind of volume, Nick?
Um, Everything we find, literally everything from wheelie bins to condoms to sanitary towels to bits of plastic, just random bits of plastic.
Hmm.
Food wrappers, Tetra packs, and all this. We find everything underwater.
Right.
Luckily, well, it depends on your definition of luck, Bill, but we don't find too much on a normal dive. But that's down to the nature of the currents here, and the
Right.
plastic gets swept out to sea,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of the plastic gets swept out too far for us to be able to get from the shore or even from a boat.
Right.
So yeah, so we don't see too much about it, but we always take a knife and a net bag with us on every dive, and we just pick up stuff. Occasionally, you find a can or you find a little bit of rope, a lot of abandoned fishing gear, which is my biggest pet hate. So
Yeah.
you've seen it around here, and I'm sure it happens all around the world. You get sports fishermen on the beach going fishing. I don't really have a problem with it. Okay, I eat fish, fine, but the type of fishing that gets done is not regulated, and when they get a line caught, they just cut the line, and this is plastic, and it
Right. Of
gets
course.
stays in the sea, and I've had customers come back with balls and balls and balls of fishing line and hooks and dead fish.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things like that are not particularly well regulated over here. But I've also seen the impact that fishing line, for example, can have on sea life.
Yeah.
They get it wrapped around them, and it can make a real mess of them, can't it?
Massively. I remember a couple of weeks ago I saw an oceanic triggerfish, which is a big fish with a hook right in its mouth. Now this is not a fish you want to be putting your fingers near its mouth. Okay, it's got very sharp teeth,
Okay.
and so we tried to capture it. We tried to get the hook out, and it was too dangerous to get the hook out. So we managed to cut the line as close to its mouth as we could, but whether or not it survives or not, it's not. But again, this is as a high level predator. We don't want to be killing them.
Right.
Um, and with the advent, and it's been around for decades, dissolvable hooks,
Ah.
biodegradable fishing line,
Right.
and why do we not use this? Why is this not a requirement? Why do we still sell steel hooks when we could be using dissolvable hooks?
Ah.
There's no difference in it, but yeah, that takes a little bit of action from government. But in Spain, for example, it's very mad about who's got who's got responsibility and the rights to do anything and who's in charge.
Yeah, it starts to get very complicated. I know for other things, we've been talking for a number of years here about ways to stop beach erosion. And yeah, I think there are a number of possibilities. None of them have been carried forward yet, but it gets very complicated about who becomes responsible for which bit.
Yep.
And, the local authority have to perhaps commission a study, and then they have to present it to Costas, and then Costas have to take it to central government. Then central government have to make a decision about which of the proposals they want to carry ahead, and then it gets very complicated.
Well, you know more about politics in Spain than I do, but I know I've tried to navigate some of this, and I've tried to get involved because we wanted to build we wanted to do some experimental, small-scale artificial reefs outside in front of the dive center,
Right.
And yeah, and trying to get a straight answer out of anyone about who can give me permission to do so.
Yeah.
So like that. So when we're almost ready to throw caution to the wind and do it anyway. And if we get told off, we'll do it anyway. And there's the age-old phrase, isn't it? It's better to beg for forgiveness than it is to ask permission. I think that's very true in Spain.
Well, yeah, and if you don't get caught,
Don't mention it on radio. Yes.
I wouldn't mention it on radio.
Well, I'm only saying we only thought about it. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely haven't done anything.
But I mean, to be honest, from the initial study that was done about 6 or 7 years ago. I think that there were 3 kind of possibilities for, helping to stop the erosion of the beaches. And one of them was actually strategically placed artificial reefs, which they felt, had the possibility to actually help the marine environment, as well as stopping the waves coming in and washing the beaches away.
But the problem with that one, I got asked a few years ago by an organization called Produnas, which is based in Marbella, and they wanted us to be advisors on building an artificial reef. And an artificial reef designed to protect the shoreline has to be of a large scale in order to be able to do it. I mean, I know my ideas were to do just like regeneration reefs, maybe 5 square meters. But to do a coastal erosion one, you've either got to build groins or you've got to build basically an underwater groin off of the beach. Right. And that's an effort of civil engineering, which, as you say, needs central government and massive amounts of funding.
Sure, yeah.
But it's definitely required because we have some beautiful coastline here, and every year it gets worse and worse and worse.
Uh-huh. You're talking about the kind of rubbish that you're picking up off the seabed. Do you have a feeling about where most of this comes from? Is it just tourists on the beach, or is it coming from other places?
I think you've probably got three main sources of the rubbish, and that's the tourists, okay, the rivers, and the fishing industry. They're the 3 main polluters of here. You get a lot of waste that gets shoved down rivers, and rivers are, I think, the number 1 source of all marine plastic.
Really?
Are rivers, yeah. And so you get a lot of agricultural waste coming through there, which is horrible. And then you also, the fishing waste, you get a lot of debris. Ghost nets are horrible as well. We found a lot of ghost nets recently.
Right. Tell us what they are, Nick.
Ghost nets, they are nets that have been abandoned or lost in a storm or cut away. And what happens, they just drop down to the bottom and just permanently catch fish until they either get floated up to the surface or recovered.
Right. And
so we call them ghost nets because they just kill. They basically just kill animals until they get recovered. It's horrible.
Right. And would these be from fishing boats, for example?
Absolutely. I mean, they can be from drift nets. They can be broken up drift nets. So they still do drift net fishing off the coast here.
Right.
Which is up to 2.5 kilometers long. Some of these nets.
Wow.
So this is and they catch all of our sardines and our anchovies, but they also do a lot of bycatch as well, which is where the problem with the moonfish and the sunfish and the dolphins come from. But yeah, they come from all sorts. You get a lot of local fishermen. You get a lot of local fishing, and they do net fishing quite close to shore.
Right.
And which I'm not sure about the legality of. I've tried to look into it, but they consider it to be artisanal fishing. But in my opinion, how much is an artisanal fishing if it's done with a diesel boat and a polypropylene net? I wouldn't consider that to be too artisanal for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing, I think, keeping traditions, but I think traditionally, if that's what we're talking about, people were not fishing for more than they could use, really.
Yeah.
People were not doing this on a large commercial scale.
No, exactly, and it's the industrial farming and the industrial fishing that is the problem I find. I understand that we all have to eat, and there has to be a supply of fish. I mean, fish has been part of the culture of cuisine here in Andalusia since the
Oh,
beginning of Andalusia,
yeah.
and I don't want to change that. I love eating fish. I mean, for me, my two favorite dishes are gambas pilpil and ensaladilla malagueña,
Okay.
and I absolutely love it. But there must be a sustainable and responsible way of fishing that we
Yeah.
can try to encourage.
Yeah. And for those of you, given that people will be listening to this all over the world, gambas pil. You come to Spain, you have to try it. It's prawns cooked in very hot oil with some chili and some garlic. It's pretty simple, isn't it? But if you get the
It
right
is.
the right piquancy to it, oh,
Oh
and it,
man, you know what? Gambas pilbara can also be done badly, and it can be done excellently. And when you find like a nice little bodeguita somewhere, and they do like the homemade gambas pilpil, oh, it's just
yeah.
absolutely wonderful.
And then we have all this kind of I call it the gunge at the bottom, with the garlic and some other spices and things. It goes kind of gungy at the bottom, and then the Spaniards
Okay,
will dip their bread in that and get all this stuff out, and it's great, isn't it?
I go one worse. I get loads of butter on the bread because you've got to have butter with bread. So you get the butter on the bread, and then I dip it into the oil and the garlic and the chili, and oh my, I'm getting hungry, Bill. I'm really getting hungry. See, that's
it's getting
oh
it's
man,
getting close. It's getting close to Spanish midday, which is lunchtime, isn't it, Nick? Nick,
absolutely,
we're going to take another short break, okay? And when we come back, let's just talk about some of the other environmental issues that you've come across in your time.
of course.
Welcome back. I'm Bill Anderson. We're coming live from the Costa del Sol. My guest today is Nick from Diving with Nick. It kind of does what it says on the tin. We're talking about diving, we're talking about environmental issues, all to do with the sea. Nick, welcome back. I guess doing what you do for not just for a living in running a dive center, but doing what you do as a passion as well, which is diving, you must become far more interested in the kind of environmental issues that relate to the sea. Yeah.
Absolutely. Part of being a diver is being an environmentalist. I mean, that's just part of the job. Um, Especially being an instructor as well. You really get reminded quite a lot about your responsibility towards the sea, and also to instill a sense of responsibility into your students as well.
Right. If
Um, you know,
no, go on, Nick. Go on.
I, I've been diving all around the world, and I've worked in a lot of environmental projects around the world. I saved Cambodian marine life, Fauna and Fauna International. There's a lot of stuff that I've been involved with, and the more you see, the more passionate you get about it, and it's like a never-ending cycle now. It's just the more you see, the more you get involved, the more you want to try to do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, we get told a lot about saving our environment and all sorts of things. And I have to be honest, I think a lot of the things that we're told is just so as they can charge us an extra tax on this or that. And I'm not always convinced that paying these taxes actually makes a big impact on the environment. But what would you say we need to be looking at? And I'm thinking particularly of the sea. What do we need to be looking at in terms of solid steps in terms of legislation to protect that part of our environment?
That's a really simple solution. Okay, there's two things that are going to destroy the sea: as overfishing,
Right,
okay, and CO2 absorption into the sea. CO2 absorption into the sea will destroy the planet, and that is a simple scientific fact, Bill.
right,
We have to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere because the biggest carbon sink in the world is the sea. And the more carbon it absorbs, the less oxygen it has in it, and the entire ecosystem will collapse. And if the ecosystem collapses, then I can guarantee that humanity are done for. And that's not meant to be fatalist. It is a simple result of we continue doing what we're doing.
right.
I agree with you. There are so many little stupid little things that people worry about and legislate about, and It's ridiculous, okay? And it's all about making yourself feel good and slapping your back on, patting yourself on the back, going, "Oh yeah, we've done this, we've done that." The UK just banned, the UK just banned shark fin imports of all kinds,
Right.
and like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's absolutely fantastic and right, but what's that actually going to do? It doesn't affect the demand for shark fins worldwide because we never imported any shark fin stuff. The amount of stuff there compared to the rest of the world, but it looks fantastic on the front of the newspapers, doesn't it?
Yes.
UK government bans shark fin imports, but what's that actually really going to do? But it's just another little feather in the environmental cap.
Yeah, it's interesting, you see, because I have, I blow hot and cold on this whole global warming thing, but what you're saying is actually from a slightly different angle. It is about the amount of CO2, but what you're talking about is the damage it's doing to the quality of our seas and oceans.
Yeah, exactly. We now have around the world we have various dead zones in the sea where there's not enough oxygen dissolved into the water in order to sustain life.
Right.
And this will continue to expand and expand and expand. And the seas are getting warmer and warmer and warmer.
Mm.
And that's not just me looking at scientific data. I have been diving in the sea for 21 years, and I can tell you the sea is getting warmer. The sea is getting warmer here. The sea is getting warmer in Cambodia, where I worked, and the sea is getting warmer in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And that can be shown as an effect now, whereby the increasing strength of hurricanes in the Caribbean, for example, and New York has literally just been flooded
Right.
due to a hurricane unprecedentedly went from New Orleans overland and was still a hurricane when it hit New York.
Right.
Okay. That comes down to one thing and one thing alone, an increase in temperature in the Gulf of Mexico. It gives an increased force.
And let's be honest, there's a lot of things that we're told that really can't be justified or can't be demonstrated. But actual measuring sea temperature is something that is actually fairly easy to do, isn't it, in a sense?
We've been doing it for over 100 years. We have a whole load of data here,
Right.
and the graph is a simple increase in sea temperatures worldwide.
Right.
Okay, and this is absolutely terrifying. They're also talking now about we'll lose the Arctic Circle within 30 years.
Right.
So we'll lose at the Arctic. There will be no sea ice at the top of the planet, which unfortunately then will increase the heating because at the moment the ice reflects a lot of the sun's radiation back into space. If that's all gone, that the sea will be absorbing that extra the sea will be absorbing that extra that extra heat,
Right.
okay, which will further exacerbate the problem. And we are literally on the precipice of a runaway heating. And don't get me wrong, humanity will survive it, but it is not going to be a pleasant place to live.
Right.
And if you think that if people think that the migration crisis is bad now, okay, wait until sub-Saharan Africa is completely and utterly unlivable.
Right.
Okay, and when you have 50 million people all having to go somewhere, and where are they going to go, Bill?
Yeah. Costa del Sol, Nick.
Well, exactly. Well, you see yourself. You've seen boats land here, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay, full of people here. Now we can call them economic migrants. We can call them refugees. We can call them whatever we want. Okay, and I'm sure there's a mixture of all of them there. But that will continue and get worse because temperatures will increase. And I like to have a healthy dose of skepticism in my life. Especially with the amount of rubbish that we get exposed to daily.
Sure.
But when the scientific community has a general consensus that this is what we're doing, I'm sorry, but it's about time we stood up and counted and start doing something about it.
Yeah. Nick, we're getting very close to the end of the show. The hour goes in very quickly, doesn't it?
Absolutely, especially when talking about diving, because I love diving.
Well, that's what you're here to do, mate. Yeah. Listen, one last question. It's a kind of more superficial question. Are there still places in the world that you are itching to go diving in?
Mate, I have got a list as long as my arm. Actually, name my leg. Okay. And the worst thing about being a diving instructor is that you get all these people coming into your dive center. And they go, "Oh, Nick, have you dived here? Have you dived here?" I think, "Oh no, that sounds amazing. I'll add it to my list. I'll add it to my list." And now, Bill, my list just gets longer and longer and longer. So I'm going to start up a GoFundMe page to send Nick diving. Okay, so if we can just
Yeah, the NUDF, the Nicoli Unt Diving Fund.
That's what I need, sir. That is exactly what I need. I want to go to all these locations around the world.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. I have found it fascinating because I love to learn about things that are not part of my direct experience. And you're a mine of information on all things to do with under the sea. We're going to go out with a song, and I'm not going to do the Under the Sea song, but I thought
Under the sea, life is much better when you are wetter diving with me.
Yeah, but we're going out. We're going out with a little bit more class. We're going to do the John Denver Calypso. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us, and have a great weekend, both to you and to all of our listeners all over the world. Bye from the Costa del Sol.
Thank you, Bill.